Hello, all you lovely people out there in the digital world, and welcome back to yet another episode of Spliced In Later, our first proper episode of 2022 after wrapping up our top 10 movies of 2021. I hope everyone enjoyed that episode. I was quite proud of it myself, mainly because it was a lot more streamlined and less babbling, as many of episodes I've done before, and indeed this one probably will be. It was a nice running time. And it was just a reminder that things are relatively better in the movie media world since the dark times before the pandemic empire of 2020. So it has made me optimistic looking back at what came, at what is coming up for 2022. There's some good movies looking forward to. Just around the corner, we've got stuff like Death on the Nile, The Batman, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Mission Impossible 7, Minions, The Rise of Gru. There's tons of movies to look forward to this year, and I hope they will all come out when they're supposed to, and I hope that I will be able to review them for you. But amongst all that, I'll try and do some other episodes, some other content for you, so it's not movie reviews 24/7. And I thought to kick off 2022, we'll finish up a series of episodes that I started way back in November 24, 2020. It's taken a lot longer to get to this point than I thought. But, things picked up. There was more things to talk about in the movie world besides just coming up with stuff to fill episodes every week until there was content available. If you are a regular listener to this channel and you've also clicked on the titles, everybody kind of knows what I'm talking about here, but especially regular listeners of the channel will know that this is the 7th and final episode in the analyzation of the eras of Disney animated feature films. Walt Disney Pictures been making Disney animated films since 1937, and they recently just released their 60th animated classic, Encanto, which has been reviewed before on this channel, on this podcast, all of that stuff. The eras are very interesting to be looking into because it's a very specific way of describing a bunch of movies from this point, because Disney has evolved as we all evolve, and the way their movies are done, the themes, the direction, the visual storytelling, the animation style, moving towards other aspects, moving away from other aspects, the cultural acceptance of the times, it's all present. You can never go back to an old Disney movie from 1941 and go, yep, that movie would work just as well now. No, each movie works for the time that it was in, and then you can look back on them with rosy-eyed glasses that say, oh yes, those were the classics. But you can't make some of those movies again. You can never go home again, essentially. It's been a very positive experience. Aside from me being annoyed with a movie every now and then, this is a very positive channel, very positive atmosphere. So I have not gone through any of these eras and gone, well, this sucked and everything here sucks and I hate it. No, it's been relatively, there's some good stuff in here, there's some maybe overblown stuff here, but the reasons why these appeal to certain people and don't are because of these eras. So we've gone through 6 so far. We started all the way back in the golden age of Disney, which had films like Dumbo, Fantasia, Snow White. And this was basically the golden age because not only did it kick off Disney's reputation for being the animated movie kings, but also it's just animation feature films in general. This was a time when animated features did not exist. Cartoons were made to be little shorts before other movies or advertised for marketing purposes until Walt Disney said, why don't we try and make a feature-length animated film, a coherent story with characters, with musical numbers, showing off our new animation skills that people will have to sit and watch for at least 60 to 70 minutes. And everyone went, that sounds insane, but Mr. Disney, we must do as we are told. We'll give it a go. And then the rest, of course, is history. People went nuts for the type of storytelling, went nuts for the musical aspects, for the animation aspects, for the kid anime aspects, all of that. And it took off there. Then we had the wartime era, which right when this was peaking for Disney, for golden age of getting into this stuff, World War II breaks out, or more specifically, America gets involved in World War II. Everybody has to go out to fight in the war, and everybody left behind has to focus on propaganda and marketing to keep everyone's spirits high and focused on the war effort. So during this period, there were no traditional animated feature films. There was more some hybrid films, some anthology films, basically just whatever Disney was working on at the time. They just sort of threw together and released in packages every year or so, just to go, we're still here, we're still working on stuff, and we are excited to get back to that when everybody returns. But for now, remember, Disney, cool, Disney make good stuff, here you go. Then we had the Silver Age. Everyone comes back from the war. We can get focused on what we were doing in the Gold Age. Animated feature films based specifically on either fairy tales or talking animals in a London sort of setting. Things like Sleeping Beauty, Alice in Wonderland, 101 Dalmatians, all of that stuff. We move into the Bronze Age, which people sort of look on a bit negatively, but not so much. This was the point where cost cutting was put in place. Traditional animation was pushed aside for a Xerox tone of printout of animation to save money there, to focus on other bits. This is the area of cult classics. Not everyone unanimously likes every single movie from this period, but there's one or two movies which other people may hate, but you yourself might love. Plus, this period has stuff like Robin Hood, The Jungle Book, The Sword in the Stone, The Rescuers. There's some good stuff in there too, depending on what you're looking for. Then we have our Renaissance, our thing that Disney is most famous for. Its high point in the 90s, where the movies that they were bringing out were beautiful, brilliantly animated, incredible musical numbers, very strong protagonist characters up against very memorable, vibrant villain characters. Less against adapting a material and more towards coming up with their own stories. This is the stuff where The Lion King was born, Mulan, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, all of those things. When people think of Disney, they think of movies from the Renaissance era. And then there's depending on your opinion, it can be the Second Dark Ages, the post-Renaissance era, the experimental age, however you want to do it. The period between the Disney that we remember and the Disney that we know now, when Disney tried all sorts of different things. They tried to embrace new animation because stuff like Shrek was kicking off. They tried to move away from musicals and more towards adventure stories and science fiction stories. They sort of threw everything else at the wall and see what would stick. And again, this is where a lot of cult classics come into it. Depending on what you like, what you get out of Disney, you may think everything in this era is trash. I specifically love a vast majority of stuff that's in here and think that a lot of it gets unfair treatment and noses turned up because they're not the traditional Disney that everybody remembers. Basically, if you see my top 10 Disney countdown, you will know that movies like Treasure Planet and Atlantis the Lost Empire are on there, and movies like The Emperor's New Groove and Brother Bear, Fantasia 2000, and then you've also got Home on the Range, which I detest with all my might, but people might like Home on the Range. So again, to each their own. So now finally, what is this now? 14 months later, we can finally cap off this running series and talk about the last era of Disney, the Disney era that's currently still ongoing. It may never end, depending on how you classify eras. We are going to talk about Disney's revival era. Now, this area is called the revival era because of one thing specifically, and that is money. Well, two things. Money and critical acclaim. Basically, it's called the revival era because that period of post-Renaissance between the 1990s and now, when things like Lilo and Stitch and Brother Bear and all that were coming out, people may like them or may hate them, but there was not the critical acclaim that was coming out for movies like Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King. There was not the immediate love at the box office for movies like Tarzan, Mulan, and stuff like that. This was a period of uncertainty where Disney was no longer the king. Animation studios like DreamWorks and even Illumination, Universal Studios, they were all pumping out their own animated stuff, which were getting more critical attention than the Disney films alongside it. And this is at a time when Disney thought they were king, so they had to do something about that. So from this point on, from 2009 till basically now, 2021, Disney turned its approach on, in the beginning, going back to what made Disney famous, which was stories about Disney princesses, and then leaning back into the musical situation as well, the songs, the big vibrant power ballads that people remember from Disney. There was an original decision in the beginning that they would also embrace the new 3D animation that everyone else was doing, specifically Pixar and DreamWorks, but they would splice it up with every now and then, every other year, doing their classic 2D animation style. This was quickly dropped as the 2D animation styles were not reaping in the box office success that the 3D animation was, and so eventually it became 3D exclusive. You are hard pressed these days to find any animation film coming out that is the classic 2D, which is a shame. There's a charm to the 2D animation that I miss. I understand why. I mean, people are always looking for new, amazing ways to be entertained by animation. Just recently when I was reviewing Encanto, and I was saying how beautiful the animation looked, which can only be achieved through that animation style, which makes it look almost as real as possible. But there is something for the charm and the simplicity of a 2D style animated story, because you know you're watching a cartoon. You don't need to all the time be convinced that you're watching a real life story that has animated characters. I'm happy for simple animation storytelling as long as there's a great story, great voice acting, the animation is used effectively to the story's end. That's just me personally. I think what it comes down to though for the revival era is money. Money, unfortunately, is the thing that is the focus of everything in Hollywood. It always has been there. It's always been that grumpy, secret, evil uncle devil sitting on the shoulder going, substitute the need for storytelling and the need to make good stories for how much money can we make off of this. And I've said this a lot in the last couple of years with 2020 and 2021 with the pandemic. Movie companies can only say for so long, oh, we're delaying releasing this movie because we don't want everybody to catch COVID off each other. Not every movie is going to make $1 billion, but because movies have made $1 billion, because you have movies like Avatar, Titanic, Avengers Endgame, even Spider-Man No Way Home recently, because some movies have made $1 billion, near $2 billion at the box office, the approach now from pretty much every company in Hollywood when they make a movie is, how much money will we receive from this? How much money should I put into this knowing that I will get more of it back? Obviously, in the olden days of Hollywood, while it was there, inflation, it wasn't so much of a big deal. If a movie tanked, it was less of a hit. They would move on to something else. And most directors could say, I don't really focus so much on making something for money. I want to tell a story, and I've done that. Whether I made $2 or $25 million, it doesn't matter. But now movies go into production going, all right, here's your budget of $160 million. And because movies similar to this have made over $2 billion, you've got to make that. Oh, wait, there's a pandemic going on. If we release it now, we're not going to make that much money. We better delay it and 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 delay it. The revival movies have been received very popularly and critically and all of that stuff, but they've also dominated the box office. If you go at the Lifetime box office on Box Office Mojo and you look at the highest grossing films, you can see them near the top 20 to 30. Frozen, Zootopia, Ralph Breaks the Internet, Moana. They have made a lot of money. So now the approach is keep doing that. Don't experiment. Don't do anything particularly out there. Keep following the same formula because we want that much money back. The more money we make back, the more movies we can do and then make the same money back and we'll all be rich. I do really like the revival movies. I think they're really good. There's some great stuff in there. But someone recently pointed out to me, and I have noticed that, is that deciding if the revival era has officially come to an end, because the other eras that we've discussed have only taken up a decade or barely that, depending on what you're looking at. 1939 to 1945, 1960 to 1970, 1984 to 1991. The post-Renaissance only went from 2000 to 2009. The revival era is over 10 years old now, and it doesn't feel like it's letting up soon. But it also doesn't feel like the Disney movies themselves have changed enough to start classifying them in a new era. Despite the movies being a variety of different storylines and different settings and embracing of different cultures, and I love them and I say keep them coming, I can still look back on it with fresh eyes and go, each movie, yes, addressing a different topic, but the formula is still the same. The formula still focuses on one particular protagonist character who has to overcome odds and personal familial problems, sing some songs along the way to discover something about themselves, all while reacting to no villains. The villains are not around. It's all about the world around them and the humor. It's very humor type movies as well, reacting to humor that's very reminiscent to the current period that the movie has come out. So when you look at something like Raya and the Last Dragon and Encanto, nearly 12 years after The Princess and the Frog in 2009, you don't really go, the movies have changed enough that we can start classifying it under a different era. And it is a little sad that the reason this is called the revival era is that these movies are lumped together under the term financially successful, rather than something like the Bronze Age, which is the Xerox tone, the Golden Age, the evolution of animation itself, the Renaissance Age, the brilliant storytelling across a wide variety of different concepts and cultures. It's basically make a lot of money, move on to the next one. Now that's a very negative view, and I don't mean that in such a way. I just think that it's time for a new era. It's time to move on, Disney, to approach different aspects in different ways. I would really love for everybody to stop worrying about money so much, but I know that will never happen. That said, at the very least, underneath all that, beside it being a focus on money, there's still some really good storytelling and some good memorable songs and animation. There's some good stuff here. It's not taking away from that. Disney just needs to do something wild and new, and Disney needs to not worry, along with every single other film company at the moment, about making the billions and billions of dollars that they made pre-pandemic. You're not going to get that back for quite some time. Even when the pandemic ends, streaming has become a thing. Streaming has really taken off, shown the advantages of it during this period. Movie theaters are dying. You're not really going to make $2 billion for every movie you release. Spider-Man No Way Home is an oddity because it had such reputation behind it built up. People went to see it for a specific thing. Something like Death on the Nile, unfortunately, isn't going to have that same response. But you can't go, okay, well, we just won't release it then until we do. Less about money, more about entertainment. Anyway, we'll wrap it up here by going through the movies for the revival period, if you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, and I will give you my brief opinion of each one of them. We start off with The Princess and the Frog, with 2009, which there's debate about whether it's even a part of this period, but I think it is, because one, it pulls away from the oddity of the post-Renaissance. Its storyline telling, its songs, its magic is a lot more relevant to the movies that came out in the revival era. It's a great movie. It's a great representation of culture and life in New Orleans, a great heroine in Tiana, and a great romantic foil in Naveen. Some really crazy imagery for the voodoo magic in there. A very charming side character called the Cajun Ray Ray. And I think it's a real good example of Disney turning a corner and finding something that worked for them away from the movies before it, Bolt, Meet the Robinsons, Home on the Range, where they weren't exactly sure where they were going and what they were doing. Then you got Tangled. Princess and the Frog might have turned the corner, but Tangled made the statement. They put their feet in the ground and said, Disney's still good. Disney knows how to do it. Disney can still make $1 billion. Disney can still take the world by storm. I remember seeing Tangled in the cinemas, which was a more modern retelling of the Rapunzel story. And I remember going, this is good. This is not what I was expecting. This is still good Disney, but this is making a mark. And I could feel it as well. And the rest, as you all know, is history. Everybody loves Rapunzel and Flynn Rider. Everyone knows the story of them facing off against the evil Mother Gothel. The song I See the Light is very memorable as well. The real proper embracing of the 3D animation as well that didn't look clunky or wonky, or they weren't sure what they were doing. They used it to their full effect in Tangled. You got Winnie the Pooh, which is unfairly everyone forgets that this movie even came out or that it existed. This is the one where 2D animation sort of died for Disney. It, of course, did not make much money at all because people didn't even know it was coming out. People didn't even know it existed. So this was the one where they went, okay, no more for that. It's a love letter to the story and history of Winnie the Pooh, and I think it's a near perfect film. It is nice, not too long, because a movie with Winnie the Pooh shouldn't be too long, but it is sweet, it is wholesome, it is charming, and Winnie the Pooh has wonderful comedic timing. He made me laugh out loud watching this movie than I have not done in many other Disney films. I think if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you think, didn't Winnie the Pooh already have a movie in the 80s or the 70s, or what are you talking about? Look up specifically a movie that's simply called Winnie the Pooh. If you need an official release date, 2011. and have a watch because it is just wonderful. Then you had Wreck-It Ralph in 2012, which embraced the non-musical side of Disney, but instead focused on taking a specific theme, which is video games, and then putting the Disney spin on it, with Wreck-It Ralph being a video game villain, boss, bad guy who wants to prove he's not a bad guy, and he has that father-daughter adoptive relationship with Vanellope von Sweet, plus throwing in all the references to old classic video games, Easter eggs, references, all of that stuff, but still managing to tell a really heartfelt story with wonderful vocal performances from John C. Reilly as Wreck-It Ralph. And then in 2013, along came Frozen. Frozen just absolutely dominated the box office and dominated the critics for good reason. Probably not as well deserved as everyone remembers it. I have gone back and rewatched Frozen, and of course, we all love Let It Go. We all love the power aspect of Elsa shaking off her, what is requested of her, making her own way, even if it's a way that people say is bad. We all love Anna and her quirkiness. We all love Yoo-hoo, Big Summer Blowout. But I don't think it holds up as much as everyone remembers it being. But this was the one where Disney also went, okay, Winnie the Pooh, not so successful. Frozen, oh my god. Okay, keep making stuff like this. Big Hero 6 in 2014, based on a Marvel property as well. Not as successful as most Marvel properties, but still a very wonderful, heartfelt, lovely movie with a great, memorable character combination in Hero and Baymax. Baymax is a wonderful, quirky, cuddly character. Plus, I loved the whole team up with their friends and making their own superhero team. Again, not a musical, but still great. Couple of years off, then we had Zootopia in 2016, which also killed it at the box office. In a world where animals live in their own little paradise, there's Zootopia, and a small rabbit called Judy Hopps wants to join the police force and ends up having a buddy cop adventure with conman fox Nick Wilde as they investigate a crime, a film noir crime of sorts, involving old-timey predators suddenly attacking the meek leaf eater sort of stuff. Not a musical, but there's a great song in here from Shakira. Wonderful comedic banter between Judy and Nick. It's great. It deserves the recognition that it did. I think it would have been the best film of 2016 for Disney. But then, of course, Moana came out, and Moana is fantastic. Moana is empowering. Moana is emotional. Moana looks incredible with the animation of the water and the sea creatures, and a great protagonist in Moana and a great sidekick in Maui, voiced by Dwayne Johnson. Nearly every song in this movie I loved to pieces. Then we had Ralph Breaks the Internet in 2008, the first sequel that Disney did in a long time. More or less, not as great really, mainly focusing on just throwing Ralph into the internet, and then again focusing on the internet and cameos and Easter eggs and references and all of that stuff. The story is still there. Again, it is all on the shoulders of John C. Reilly, and he does a great job. But yeah, this movie is less story, less substance, and more reference. Frozen 2. Now, Frozen 2 is better than Frozen, in my opinion, even though everyone else disagrees with me. Frozen 2 really took the concept that they established in Frozen and then ran with it, and really empowered Elsa in her quest to discover who she is as a person. Wonderful animation as well, really, with the fire and water and all of that stuff there. Frozen 2 has really stuck with me in the only couple of years since I saw it. And then this year we had Raya and the Last Dragon, which I already did an episode on, so if you want my proper opinion of that, go watch that. I thought it was a great adventure story though. Raya was a good protagonist too. It didn't really be as good as I wanted it to be, but still some good stuff for Disney, especially after a year gap when nothing came out in 2020, because, you know, we want to make $1 billion. And then, of course, we finished with Encanto, the 60th anniversary, a wonderful representation of Colombian culture, great music by Lin-Manuel Miranda, great protagonist in Mirabel, voiced by Stephanie Beatriz, great concept of a family with different powers. I loved it. I thought it was great, and is also one of the best films of the year by far. So there you are. That's the revival age, and that is Disney's ages, all 7 of them. I hope it's 7. I keep saying 7. I'm going to feel foolish if I edit this later and it's incorrect. I hope you've all enjoyed. I would like to ask all my listeners out there, which is your favorite era of Disney? Is it the Golden Age, the Wartime Age, Silver, Bronze, Renaissance, Post-Renaissance, or Revival? Yeah, there is 7, thank goodness. All unique, all a great representation of the period of history that they all came out in, except for Revival, which is more just today. Can't really represent history if you live in it. But each with their own cult classics, with their own well-loved movies across everybody who's ever lived, and all contributing to Disney's domination of an empire of sorts. They really are ruling Hollywood at the moment, but it's specifically their animated classics that has really helped them achieve that dominance. All right, thank you very much for listening. I will be back next week with another look at the MCU. I believe we'll be talking about the Avengers from 2012, so I'm excited to get into that with you. But until then, I love and appreciate you as always. Thanks again for tuning in. Stay safe, stay kind to another one. And now that I've listed them all, go back and watch your favorite Disney animated films. Until next time, you've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.